Use the power of discovering new habits to create success in all areas of life. Body, fitness and nutrition, being, spirituality, passion and purpose, balance, marriage, kids and relationships, business, marketing, sales, leadership and systems. Transform your life by learning how habits work. And now your host, husband, father, entrepreneur, trainer, coach, and warrior, Jesse Buell.
Welcome back to the Habit-Based Lifestyle Podcast. I am your host, Jesse Buell, and today we're going to be talking about the habit of preparation. I'm here with a good friend of mine, Adam Rice, who is the founder of ISI, Elite Training, and also the co-founder of a meal prep company called 212 Meals. And hey, man, it's great to have you on here.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, so we kind of met each other on Facebook, and you're out here with your family. We just kind of wrapped up a workout, but one of the things that I've done is it's kind of followed you over the years, and one of the cool things is I've watched you build your fitness company into a franchise model. But one of the things that I want to kind of start out with is, where did all of this start for you, man?
Being a fat kid.
Okay.
So I knew that I went through a transformation, ended up, long story short, ended up losing about 70 pounds, went to a camp at the University of Iowa, from Iowa, and they told me pretty much I'd never play there. So at that kind of moment, I had a decision to make as a junior in high school, whether I was going to let it defeat me or I was going to do something about it.
Okay.
Ended up, like I said, losing 70 pounds and completely transformed my life and allowed me to go on to play Division I baseball at a pretty high level. And it really showed me controlling what you can control. We control so much more of our destiny than what we think we do.
Okay. So at 17 years old, you're 70 pounds overweight. You're playing baseball.
Yep.
And you decide, hey, you know, this guy tells me this. I can either use it for fuel or I can use it to just kind of, you know, stop and just quit and kind of go the other way. And you decided to use this for fuel. Because I think one of the big things in the fitness industry is everybody thinks that everybody's in the fitness industry has been fit their whole life.
Right. For sure.
You know, and I think it's cool that you have a story around it, how fitness has changed your life. But so you go from playing, you know, high school baseball to all of a sudden you go to college. You know, what was the mindset going into college, man? It's not like you went to a small college. You went to like one of the top baseball colleges there is.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely at the beginning, like, what the heck am I doing here type thing. You know, I was someone who didn't necessarily have the skill set. I had to fight for it. I was the first one in the cages every day, last one to leave the field. And so it really taught me work ethic. You know, so I arrived there and was in great shape, and then went on to play 3 years and ended up at that time, we were ranked 4th in the nation, and we were playing South Carolina to go to Omaha on ESPN. And so I knew I wanted to go in the fitness industry right away. And so what I did was I kind of used in Myrtle Beach, there's it's a small, people think of it as a big town, but it's relatively a small town of people that live there. And so I used my name, and at that time, and I just said, hey, I'm going to start training athletes. So I went into Anytime Fitness. I still had to do an internship. And I said, I'll pay you $800 a month if you come in and let me launch your personal training program. And so I did that, and within like 2 months had like 48 clients and ended up opening a small personal training studio called Beachbody Fitness.
Okay.
Was there for 2 years, ended up getting a nice letter from Beachbody, who has Insanity, P90X, and all that. And they're like, yeah, you got to change your name. So ended up that's where ISI was born, and started going that route.
And ISI stands for?
Stands for Iron Sharpens Iron, from Proverbs 27:17.
Okay. And like, what does that mean to you?
Yeah. So when we had to change our name, I was like, all right, well, what do I want? I want the mission to be embodied in the name, you know? So I don't want this cliche mission statement. I want it to be embodied in our culture and who we are. And so it was, we were in church one day, and, you know, it was talking about iron sharpens iron as one person sharpens another. But the thing that got me about that is you can't sharpen someone or become better without friction. Like you can't sharpen iron without friction.
Sure.
And so it was just kind of something I embodied, is like, there's always going to be obstacles. And so when you lead with that, the people that you're going to surround yourself with, and you say, hey, like, there's going to be obstacles in our way, no matter what relationship you're in, what business you're going to take on, wherever you're at. And so it was like, man, like that's what I want our company to stand for and be embodied, is to know, like, hey, we're all in this together. There's going to be obstacles, but we'll surpass them.
Sure. So, what year did you start actually training people? And then when did you open your first facility?
So 2012, I started training people. 2012, I opened my first facility.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was right away. So.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. So what is what's one thing that you could say that allowed you to do this after, like, within 1 year of training people?
I mean, I think it's really like, it's controlling what I could control, and that was energy. That was how prepared I was, how much I cared for people, the skill sets that I had to develop, even though I didn't like them. So we were talking earlier, marketing. It's not something that's an actual huge passion of mine, but I know
Right.
I know it very well. And so just developing skill sets, Photoshop, a little bit of videography, things to get me by, to build the brand until we were at the point where we could hire people to do that.
Yeah, because, I mean, if you think back when you first start training people, like, your marketing is basically the results you get from clients. And that's kind of how you start out.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, I think it actually plays I don't love fitness, which is so interesting, because I love it from the standpoint of how it transformed my life, but I'm not the typical guy who wakes up and like, man, I can't wait to work out today.
Right.
And so that has always, I think, helped me in the way of, like, I've always loved coaching and that aspect of pushing people past the limit, but from the actual, like, kinesiology standpoint, like, I'm not a nerd about that. I don't love it. I love the psychology piece of it.
Right.
And that really allowed me to spend some time on getting people to developing skill sets, right? That would say, all right, how do I impact more people and get them through the door? And it's all in a mindset of, like, hey, I can't help you unless you get through the door, and creating a platform and product that changes people's lives.
Yeah. So you open your own gym. How long did it take you to actually expand into another facility once you did that?
So 2013 was our first ISI, and then 2015 was our second location. And there was just we went through a ton of growth, which led to a lot of exposure of some broken systems. And I mean, I was only 23 years old at that time. And so trying to expand in that way, it was definitely learned a lot of lessons.
Yeah. I always say is, like, when you expand in business, even I can remember when I went to 2 locations, you really began to see the kinks, in the system, and things would fall apart. But it would force you to kind of grow and figure stuff out. But I can remember, going from 1 facility to 2 being like one of the most stressful times of my life. But then also with that was also one of the biggest growth. So did you experience going from 1 to 2 being harder than going from, like, 2 to 3, 3 to 4?
Yeah. Well, yeah. So we had substantial growth, and we kind of just got by, on the seat of our pants and our culture and the fact that we cared so much. But yeah, so complexity, something we always talk about, we just talked about in our corporate meeting, was growth creates complexity. Complexity kills growth. And so you have to fight, I think, as an organization, as an entrepreneur, whoever you are, to keep things simple. It doesn't come naturally. It's like, usually the byproduct of something complex is because something bad happened. And so if one thing bad happens, for instance, if a coach or trainer cheats on their husband or wife with a client,
Right.
something bad happens. So now there's got to be policies and procedures rather than just trusting the human element. And so we make things complex, and it's natural for us to do that. And so, yeah, I think through that, and I've always been someone who has really intentionally gone after growth, and maybe it was just an entrepreneur and being bored and saying, all right, we got here, let's go to the next. But I also knew in the back of my mind is, like, this is going to expose us in a big way, and that excites me because, like, franchising, for instance, is right now our first one is about to open in Georgia, and I knew that there has to be such systematic approaches to everything that we do, and that's exciting because that's not naturally who I am. I'm
Right.
more of a visionary. I'm not an operations type person, so it has forced us to do that, which is exciting.
Yeah. So one of the things that you talked about was like, hey, trainers, or employees sleeping with, clients. You sound like you've had personal experience, as we've all. If you've been in the fitness industry, this happens quite often. Do you remember the first time that happened, and you're like, oh my God, dude, like this is something I never would have thought happened is like now happening in my business. And like, not only that, but did you have a policy back then about, hey, you can't date clients, any of that stuff? 'Cause that's a huge issue in the fitness industry.
Yeah, it's a massive issue, and we hit this thing head on in the beginning, and we've had to let a couple people go. So values for us is we're a very, very family based organization, and so we have kids in there, and we have a great reputation because we've had to make tough decisions based on our values.
Right.
So that's not always easy, but yeah, we had kind of the policy is that you cannot date members, you cannot obviously sleep with members, but you can't control where you meet your significant other. Like that, you also have to know that as a business owner, I think. And so all I asked of my staff was, hey, be super transparent. Like if you have a connection with a member, like that's fine, but you need to tell me first before
Right.
anything happens. And then you need to, if you're going to go on a date, it needs to be out of this market. So into another town, see if you like it before we take any more steps. And actually one of my main guy who's actually moving to the Charlotte area next week to head up the training side of our franchises. He met his wife at ISI.
Oh, wow.
But he took all the proper procedures, and said, hey, we have a connection. I'm going to take her on a date. And I think as long as you're transparent and you meet that thing head on, but when you have to make a decision, it's like people are always going to be looking at what decision you make.
Right.
And that's what your culture is going to stand for.
Yeah. I mean, I can remember, our policy, because I had been in the fitness industry for quite a while as a manager at like box gyms, things like that. And that was one of the first policies was like, you can't date members. You definitely can't sleep with them, and you can't date employees and definitely can't sleep with them. And we had this happen a few times, and I had to get rid of a couple employees, and I had to get rid of employees and members, and it kind of turned into a shit show.
Right.
But that was my policy, and I was kind of like black or white on it.
Yep.
And I can remember having, getting rid of a couple of my best employees over this. And it wasn't very fun. And what was really not fun is, catching a member, or catching a trainer sleeping with a client and then realizing it had been going on like, 6 months. And meanwhile, that trainer is dating, another girl that's coming in and out of the gym. And it
Right.
was just kind of crazy. So what's been the biggest challenge, man, for you for like your business and growth and all that?
I think every solution creates a new problem. I mean, it's like, all right, there's always a point of pain, right? And the second that you solve it, you're creating a new problem in a good way. And that's growth. But it's really that dynamic, and me not being a operations person, that's probably been, my own struggle is I know how things should be, but as far as like doing a systematic approach, now that we have, those people in place that can do that, but that's always been, I think the biggest struggle is like, we've always kind of just made it happen.
Right.
We had these core competencies about our culture, the level of accountability that we're going to offer our members, the family atmosphere, and that's what kept people there. But when you start to grow into multiple locations, that attention to detail starts to slip when you have 50 plus employees. And so it gets exposed. And so when we were exposed, I mean, it's just nothing negative really happened. We just stopped growth, and you really have to explore on why that happens. And, so like I said, every problem has been a great thing because it's taught us more and more. And I think it's more about, hey, how less dumb can we get every day instead of how can we solve these major issues?
Right. So over the last, 7 years, you've had your own business. How many locations have you grown into?
So right now we're at 6 corporate locations, working on our 7th in development, which will be our corporate headquarters. And then we've got 5 franchises in development between North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia.
Okay. Yeah, dude. So like you've literally almost a club a year. It sounds like you've opened, and then not only that, you've, had 3 kids in that amount of time, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So what is that like for you to balance out having kids, and not just one kid, but having 3 kids, and you're opening up, locations, and then it's kind of like, employees are, kind of like kids sometimes, depending on how they are. But what has that been like for you, man, as a father and husband, just kind of going through this transition?
It's been challenging, but it's been awesome because my wife she's a rock star. She gets it. She supports it. She really wants nothing to do inside the business as far as a role, which is completely fine. But I was asking the guy the other day, I said, what's your wife do? He said, she's a domestic engineer. And I was like, stay-at-home mom. That's awesome. But she has been kind of the rock behind that. And for me, I feel like you have to know you have to have self-awareness. But for me, I work in seasons. So I'll go 9-10 weeks extremely hard, and then I'll back off for 2 to 3 weeks. That's just how I personally work the best. I don't think there's this fine line of balance. I just try and be, and it's a struggle. Like, to say I'm good at it is probably a lie, but to try and be present in the moment. And a big thing for me too is I try and work at 5 in the morning, 6 in the morning, and then sometimes 8, 9 o'clock at night. So I'm with them a little bit more.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, dude, one of the most difficult things for me was, trying to grow the business, going to work at 5, a lot of times getting home at 8.
Right.
And me being the one who was, at work that whole time and kind of, not being super engaged at home. You come home and you hang out for an hour, hour and a half, and then all of a sudden you're going to bed, and just not spending a lot of time with my wife and kids. And that was one of the things that I realized had to change, about 7 years into business, not like, 1 year in. So, that was a huge obstacle for me. And I know a lot of gym owners, business owners, as they spend, 14 to 16 hours a day at work. And usually their family is kind of the one thing that gets pushed on the back burner, and it can be a major problem. But I can't imagine opening, literally almost a club every year, a new club. And then on top of it, you're having, 3 kids over a 7. How old's your oldest kid?
5.
Yeah. So 3 kids over 5 years. That's crazy, man, just to think about that.
Yeah. Like I said, it's been awesome, but she's, without her, it'd be impossible.
Sure. Yeah. So, one of the things that I made sure to name my wife was kind of the CEO mom.
Yeah.
Because, she was kind of the person who kept everything together at home, and she ran it like a business. And once she started realizing, hey, maybe I need a house cleaner, maybe I need a nanny to kind of help out, things really began to change for her. But as you're going through this growth phase, and you still are, that hasn't really slowed down. What has been like kind of your favorite part of just going through this?
I think for me, it's starting with the end in mind. So always having, and that also relates to exactly what we were just talking about with the balance or whatever you want to call it, is like, I've never, from the very beginning, I didn't want this brand to be about me, for 2 reasons. I knew that we'd have more growth, but also I don't want to be pinned down to being the one that's getting the calls 24 hours a day.
Right.
And so that's really, I've always thought about that in business, is like, all right, how is this thing gonna, I will not start something that potentially could not operate without me. And so that's always a huge thing for me. And so when I set up a new business, it never has me in the picture as far as doing the day-to-day operations. So if financially we can't do it without me in the picture, we don't do it. And so that's a huge thing, is always just starting with the end in mind. And it's also something that we lead our staff with, is like, hey, you've got to, whether it's bonus opportunity, whether it's you want to own your own franchise, whatever it is, you got to start with the end in mind. And most people are they're reactive to their day, right? And so I think we've been very, very proactive in saying, all right, what's the next step? And then we're reactive to opportunities that, that come up that I think weren't in the forecast.
Sure. And, what I think about that is, your business has a path for your employees if they want to go to the next level. And I think that's one of the big things in the fitness industry is everybody wants to open their own gym. Everybody wants to have their own training facility. The problem is most trainers get into the training industry because they've liked training. They're passionate about it, but they're not very good at business. And so one of the areas they struggle the most is, they may be good at training, but they may not be good at business. And that doesn't equal you to be successful. And so, dude, for 7 years to open up 6 facilities, to begin opening up a franchise, I mean, that's a huge, huge thing. And knowing, like, I had 2 gyms and I knew what that was like, but I can't imagine having 6 and then opening up this franchise. So, dude, just from that perspective alone, that is like a massive win. And knowing you didn't really have prior fitness experience outside of, you playing college baseball and stuff like that, which obviously you learn, but the majority of your clients now are just the kind of adult population.
Yeah.
So that's awesome, man. What is, what has been, maybe a struggle as a fitness business owner who's, how many employees do you have now?
We're at over 55.
Okay, so over 55 employees.
Yep.
And what has been your biggest struggle with, having 55 employees?
Honestly, it's exactly what you just talked about. It's like you have some of your best are wanting more, and so it's really just setting a clear expectation of like this industry. If you're coaching, like there's a cap out because it's just a value thing, right? So a lot of people want to be in that, so you've got to create more skill sets to be able to do that, and those that do that are going to be able to go on further in this industry. But I don't think a lot of people want to be 50 years old and coaching, and so they need to start looking at, what is my next step? And that was a huge, huge motivation for me to start franchising, is like I can start to have these conversations in partnership with my employees rather than, just being boss. And so it's like, hey, if you want, like, I'll teach you, like, here's what we need to do to get you to own your own franchise. And so it starts to create a partnership type language and verbiage rather than, I'm your boss and you're making blank amount and I'm making blank amount, and what typically will happen, right? And then with that, we've got a freaking great team. Like, we've got an amazing team that's bought into the culture, and that's the biggest thing. Like, our retention is amazing with our team. I mean, we've got guys, like I said, the guy Matt, who's moving up here to Charlotte to go full time on our franchise side. He's been with us since we were about 4 months in. 2 other guys who just celebrated their 5-year with us.
Okay.
Everybody. So we just don't have really team members that leave unless they're, kind of switching industries or
Sure.
whatever. And that's been a huge thing because they're able to teach that culture. And then that also gives us a good database to when we go and open up a new location like we did in Charlotte. I was able to pull a coach from Myrtle Beach and make him the head performance coach in Charlotte. So he carried the baton of the culture. Yeah,
that's awesome, man. I can remember I think I had a couple people who had been with me since, I opened. So like, literally I sold it to my manager, my facilities to my manager who had been with me almost 12 years. And then he was with me at another actual box gym for 3 years before that. So we had worked together for 15 years. And just to be able to hand that off to him made me feel really good about, okay, now I got this guy that I know can continue to build this brand.
Right.
But, I had several employees that had been there, 8 years, 5 years. But I also feel like you have to bring in new people to continue to raise the culture in, the entire facility. Because I think sometimes after a while, if you're there, especially my place, because we didn't do group training, wasn't a big, huge thing. It was part of it, but we did a lot of one-on-one and small group.
Right.
So one of the things that would happen is people would build relationships with that trainer, with that person. So when they left, it was kind of like, okay, well, maybe I need to leave too. And, what I'm kind of hearing you say is like, hey, we have all group training. It's about the gym. It's about, the atmosphere. It's about ISI. It's not about each individual trainer. And, that's one of the things that I think is really cool about what you've been able to do is it's not been about you. It's been about ISI and this brand.
Yeah, no, that's been exactly it. And of course, I mean, coaches gain, it's the hardest thing in the fitness world. Like in no other industry would you have someone come up to you and be like, well, I'm going to, because so-and-so left Walmart, I'm shopping at Target now.
Right.
And so it's a very it's something that is our biggest asset as far as like our culture is the relationships that we develop. So there's such a fine line there because like in any other industry, an underperforming employee, you can't just make a yes and no decision like you can in any other industry because they have tied relationships and there's gonna be some sort of recourse for any termination that happens. And so I agree with you 100%. Bringing in new blood, bringing in a new set of standards is amazing. It's just a fine line of balance between the people that have been with you from day one. So that's one of the hardest things probably is trying to continue to develop and keep a fire lit under our team that's been there for 7-8 years. Well, I guess 5-6 years. And so it's a strategy. Like you've as a leader, you've got to continue to spread vision. You've got to continue to put vision on your people because one of my favorite sayings from the Bible is where there's no vision, people perish. And it's like, if you don't know where you're going, you don't know where you're going.
Right. And if you don't know where you're going as an owner, then everybody that's on your team is lost.
Amen.
Following you. And eventually it's kind of like the blind leading the blind. And eventually the blind leave and go find somebody else they can follow. So, like, let's be honest, man. Like, most guys aren't starting training facilities at, 23, 22, years old. And the fact that you've been able to do this, who are some mentors that have really helped you along the way or coaches along the way that have really helped you be as successful as you are? Because we all, we don't do this alone.
Right. Yeah, it's been interesting. That whole journey for me has been interesting because I've tried to find several throughout the years, and I'm a huge believer in the books and the content that's put out by some of the bigger names out there. That's their best stuff, and it's available to anybody. Things like this, So I followed you honestly, and what's funny is a lot of people don't even know that they have people following them like that.
Yeah.
But for me, there has been no like one person. Martin Rooney is a huge mentor of mine, and then also a local owner took me under of Chick-fil-A in the Myrtle Beach. Jeff Cash took me under his wing and really started to explain. Like we always had the care piece taken care of. Like
Sure.
That was never an issue, but it was the operations piece of everything.
The back end systems and procedures and
Exactly. And so he really took me under his wing about 3 years ago and showed me a lot, spent some time with me. And like I said, it's just continuously staying in podcasts and different things like that. But I think where a lot of people go wrong with that too is they try and take everything and they say, I got to be like Jesse. I got to be like Adam. I got to be like Tony Robbins. And the fact is, like, there's one nugget that you can relay into your life. And I did that early on. Is like I was following all these people. And I'm like, I'm going to go do this. I'm going to go do this. And I found myself in a hamster wheel.
right.
And so I took 2 years, and it was the most beneficial 2 years of my life. I took 2 years off. I said, I'm not listening to anybody. I'm just going to go put into action the stuff I've heard for the past 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then now, about 2 years ago, started taking things back in. And that's what I really learned from that whole process was like, look, I don't got to be like anybody. There's in one conversation or one thing, there's going to be a golden nugget that you can take out. And it's really, how can you apply that to your own life? Because it just takes self-awareness. For me, I mean, again, I think everybody's different, but self-awareness and preparation are the two key things to go into the next level.
Yeah. So let's talk about preparation. What does this look like for you today for preparation? And then also, how do you like spread this to your team?
Yeah. So I'm huge on getting things off my subconscious. Being like, when I've got a million things on my mind, if I don't dump them, I become a different person. I become stressed out. I become lethargic. I become not present. And so this happened to me literally like 3 weeks ago. We were going through a corporate organizational shift We were going through, I had to get some things done for the 212 meal prep. We had a trip coming up, and then I had all of this franchise stuff that we're developing and implementing. And then we've got our first franchisee in development about to launch in 3 weeks. So just a ton of stuff on my head. And so I just asked my wife, and again, she's awesome. So I was like, look, let's go to Starbucks for 2 hours. I've got to dump my brain. And so I just organized everything. I said, franchise, here's everything on my mind. 212 meal prep, everything on my mind. Corporate structure, here's everything on my mind. And the second I did that, it was just like I'm good. And so for that, like, preparation for me is not, I don't have any like morning ritual type things that, a lot of people have. But for me, it's the night before. So I've got to know, and what I have is an action log. So it's a spreadsheet, and items on there are either open or closed. And then it's got a deadline date. And so that's the way that I operate personally. And Sundays I do a new action item log every single week. And so it's these 5 or 7 things, but I know exactly when my meetings are. I know what I've got to do for the week, and I don't try and pinhole, because early on I tried to pinhole myself into, I've got to get these 7 things done today. Yeah. And I felt like a failure because I wasn't getting them done. And so I go by the week now, and it's like, naturally you're going to take care of the things that are most important, I think.
Right.
Just naturally. And so it's not, again, trying to simplify things down. And it's like, all right, I've got these things on my list this week. Before I move to anything else, I'm going to crush these things. And if I don't get to them, like, they'll carry to next week. Like, at the end of the day, it's 5 years from now, it's not going to matter.
Right. So one of the other things, man, for you is obviously, you talk a lot about your faith, but when did you originally kind of get into church? Is this something you've always grown up with, or is this something you were just introduced to, a few years ago, or like, how does that actually happen in your life?
Yeah, and that's a great question. We really, when I met my wife, she's from a small town in South Carolina.
Okay.
Sherrill, South Carolina. But it was huge. I've always had something tugging at me my whole life. But with travel baseball and all of that, we never went to church growing up. But when we got together, it was something that became a priority. And it's really, when people say, like, what's your biggest quote unquote key to success? It's my faith. Like, because at the end of the day, I realize none of this is mine. None of this is ours. And what's going to happen is meant to happen. And, so it's not being careless with that and saying, don't work hard or anything like that. But it's like, what the worst thing that could happen, whatever. Like, I've thought so many times, like, we go bankrupt, whatever.
Yeah.
Like, we open a new, like, whatever. Like, I still have my family,
Right.
And so I always try and, again, start with the end in mind. Like, what's the worst thing that can happen? I lose everything. All right. Like, I still got my faith and I still got my family. And to me, like, that's the 2 most important things. So every decision that I make is really like, it's that relays a level of comfort, and it's been probably my biggest strength, but also my biggest weakness, because I haven't been strategic with a lot of things because I've relied so heavily on my faith, and thank God it's worked out.
Sure.
Right. But I think people can get careless with that as well. It's like, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. It's like, that's good on one side, but at the other time too, it's like, you need to still be strategic about things.
Sure. How long have you been married?
8 years on Tuesday, or last Tuesday. So 2 days ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what's been we're going to go both sides of this. So what's been the hardest thing with marriage in the 8 years you've been married?
It's funny because opposites attract, right? But also when you get into marriage, it gets frustrating too, because opposites, you at the beginning, it's like, all right, for instance, I'm a visionary. She's a very, like, frugal, I call her. Like, she's not like most women. Like, she's wants to save money. Like, she'll be the one that picks out a shirt at Target, walks around Target, and then goes and puts it back on the rack. And I'm quite the opposite. And then she's very, like, conservative. She doesn't like to take a ton of risk. And so I'd say navigating those conversations and getting
Yeah, I mean, dude, that's got to be like, hey, I'm getting ready to, hey, you want to open another gym? And she's probably like, hell no, I don't want to open another gym.
That's exactly what it is. When I told her we were franchising. But the thing is, like, at the end of the day, I've been able to, I think, as a leader of our family, been able to show her that, even if I do fail, we're still going to make it. And so over the years, there's been a level of trust that has really developed. And she has, it's funny because, you know, when I truly believe the man leads. So at different seasons of our marriage, when I haven't led well, then the things that she's doing or her actions, I haven't loved, right? But when I do lead well, it's funny because it kind of follows follows along in line. It's simplifying things. Like, well, if I do this, then chances are she's gonna do it,
Right.
but without having to, you know, to pull that. And again, you're the marriage expert, but we're
Yeah, man, I'm just getting, I'm gathering data on you. But no, one of the reasons I ask is like, you know, of course, you know, who we marry is a lot of times opposite. Like I was very like, you know, production driven. And then my wife would kind of come back behind me and kind of pick up the pieces, put them together. We did that for a few years. And then as we did that, I kind of started pushing my wife into the role of the business as kind of like the cheerleader for everybody, because I realized I wasn't really that person. I was more of, you know, let's drive production, let's get new people in, let's sign new people up. Once we kind of found that, you know, we kind of would play off each other. But it's always interesting to me to hear, you know, things like this, because I can remember going to my wife and saying, hey, you know, let's expand the business. And she's like, oh, hell no, here we go again. And so, you know, I can totally understand on both sides of it, because I remember having those conversations and my wife's like, oh my God, we're doing so good. Can't we just, you know, stay here? And I'm like, well, no, we can't. We're going to keep growing. And she would always be like, oh my gosh, here we go again. But it was cool because, you know, I think of like a jar of seashells. You fill it up and, you know, your wife kind of comes in and dumps the sand in, and that's where she kind of helps support you, is she's filling in the gaps for where you're not, you know, able to do that. So
yeah, and it's, I mean, through being together for 8 years, she knows what I need. Like,
right.
And she knows at times when she knows when I need that nagging person, but she also knows, you know, or like, did you do this? Did you do that? Did you check in with this person? But she also knows when to just listen, and she also knows like how to strategically sit down with me, because she has nothing to do with the business from an operation side, anything really. She pays the bills, but she doesn't do bookkeeping or anything like that.
Right.
She's involved, like she goes to work out there every day and all that. But again, she's amazing, so she knows exactly what I need when I need it. From that side of things, and it's been interesting to kind of see our marriage evolve over the years, and you know, not take things too seriously, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, dude, I'll be honest with you, man. Mine at times was a shit show, opening up, you know, new locations, having kids and things like that. So, you know, the fact that you're, you know, 8 years in and you've been able to do this that's pretty amazing. What has been the best thing about being married to your wife these 8 years?
Put me on the spot, because you'll probably listen to this. It's probably the support, man. Like it's got to be, like, I couldn't do it without her. I know that, you know, if I was single and doing this, things would look a lot different, I'm sure.
Yeah, you'd have been done like 5 years ago.
Yeah,
man.
Exactly. And so I think from that side, it always goes back to the faith piece. Is like, you know, that's we've done some things over the years that just haven't made sense, like even like financially, haven't made to do with our faith, like haven't made sense, but because of our faith, we just do it. It's like, what's the worst thing that can happen? She's always for that. She's the most kind-hearted individual that you'll ever meet, and then she's grounded, like where I'm not, you know, and I'm always thinking about things and all that, and she's grounded in who she is. She's grounded in what she believes, and that's huge for me, because again, as a visionary, I think it's important to surround yourself with people like that, whether it's a mentor or a wife or whatever it is.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. So what is your wife's name?
Tristan. All
right, so if you're listening to this is for you, Tristan. One of the things that I realize is one of two in coaching couples, one of two people is always more grounded, and the opposite, you know, even at times it's the husband or wife, but a lot of times it's the wife who's more grounded, is we come back to them and they kind of help ground us, and then we move on. And so when I heard your story about hey, I went to Starbucks, my wife was there with me, is she's there for you to kind of come back to this place of grounding, get back in alignment, and then move away. And even if she's not active, in the day-to-day business, the fact that she's there to support you, and she has an outside influence because she's seeing things on the outside. She knows you. She knows all these things about you. She has an intuition about you, and she can kind of help steer you in the right direction when you're not grounded. And I think that's really cool because, I notice that in my wife a lot is I'm a constant kind of go, get shit done. And sometimes she has to, I would say slap me upside the head and kind of get me back to, okay, like, here's where you're going. Let's help point you in the right direction. Okay, now go.
Yeah.
And I think that's cool, man. So
yeah, I mean, that day, she's like, you didn't even need me. I said, she's like, I didn't even do anything. I said, you don't even know. Like, just being there in that moment, it just helps me, go through that. And like I said, it without that, God, who knows where I'd be.
yeah, one of the big things inside of, what we teach in habit-based marriage is this idea of co-creation where, ultimately that's the purpose of a married couple, is to co-create together. It doesn't mean you have to work together, but it's meaning that where each other fits in each other's lives, and how to, whether it's co-create in the family, the business, all these other areas, communication, you guys are able to co-create together and kind of head in the same direction. And one of the things that I've continued to hear you say is like, listen, have the end in mind before you get started. And a lot of that has to do with preparation. And so I think that's cool that you really emphasize that with not only your family, but your business.
Yeah, for sure.
So, well, hey man, what is like one thing, I know we talked a little bit about preparation, but if you were, talking to an entrepreneur, out there, what is one thing that you would tell them to do every single day as a habit?
One thing every single day. I mean, the overarching thing, it's not super subjective, but it's control what you can control, and so I think that's always been something I believe in. And so that goes as far as where your thoughts go and all of that. But actually one like habit, I would say know what the heck you're doing tomorrow. Like that's, for me, that's huge. And it's okay to know you're not doing anything too. Right. So it's
right.
like Saturday, Fridays, I know like Saturdays, like unless we have an event, like I'm not doing anything work related. And so, but I know that, so I'm not trying to bring in work, on that. And so I'm very protective of really how I prepare, but it's not like this strategic way of doing things. It's just I know what I have to do tomorrow, and then because I truly believe action alleviates anxiety. Like
sure,
that when you take action on something, you realize it's not as big of a deal as what you actually thought it was going to be, and you feel a lot better about it.
Okay, cool. So control what you can control. Every time I see the word preparation, I think of separation as in the preparation, which there's a guy that I know very well, Russell Wilson, quarterback of the Seahawks, who always says that, in every interview, I think he brings up preparation, but his thing was like separations in the preparation. So
yeah, and I mean that's that's what I was telling you earlier, is like getting that through to 20 and 30-year-olds who want more out of life. It's like everyone's so worried about what is the next skill set, what do I got to do, to get, and that's it. It's like, are you spending an hour out of your week preparing for the meeting? Like how you show up to a meeting, how prepared. Like I'll have people show up to meetings, in the car. It's like, how can you truly get everything out of this meeting if you're distracted?
right.
So it's how you show up to different things, and how you show up to a workout. Are you coming through at the last minute? Like just different things, how are you preparing? And I think just not overcomplicating it. It's just know what you need to do.
Sure. Well, awesome, man. Well, hey, I really appreciate you being on here.
Appreciate you having me.
Dude, I look forward to continuing seeing your success. And just so you know, like the success you've had is not normal in the fitness industry for anybody, let alone, where you're at in life and your age and having 3 kids. So just the fact that you've done what you've done in a short amount of time, man, it's amazing.
I
so
appreciate it,
congratulations.
man. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for being on here, man. If you guys are looking to connect further, with a group of like-minded people. Join myself and so many others in the Habit-Based Lifestyle Secrets group on Facebook, where I'll be dropping daily habits to help you live to your full potential. If you want to be one of our next case studies and begin living this habit-based lifestyle, feel free to reach out to me if you have comments, questions, or concerns. Also, if you are looking at possibly doing a franchise in the fitness business, I would definitely recommend Adam and his ISI Elite Training Systems. I will be dropping in the show notes. What is the website, man, they can look at?
It's just isielitetraining.com/franchise.
Okay. And if you have any questions about franchise opportunities, you can check it out there. And until next episode, have a great day.